Badass Attitudes, licensed here, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. B.A.D.A.S.S is an acronym, and each Wednesday, Kelly shares tips, tools, and information about how you can become licensed to be badass too. Kelly Orchard's podcast for successful badassery. You know what doesn't get old? Being called a badass.
That's right. You got that right, Bobby. Being called badass does not get old. Happy Wednesday, badasses out there. This is Kelly Orchard, the Badass Certifier, on Wednesday Wisdom on the podcast for successful badassery. September 1st. Can you believe it? We're already in the month of September of 2021, and what a ride this year has been. I don't talk a lot about, what's going on much in the outside world on the podcast. You don't really need me to. I'm not ignoring that things go on, but let's be honest. Do you really turn to the podcast so I can talk to you about all the negative stuff? Or do you turn to the podcast because you want some badass tools? So I give you badass tools and we just discuss other things. I was just sharing with a client, I too have stuff going on in my life. I share a little bit more about that here. I get a little more personal with my personal life with you because, I'm not looking for your sympathy. Your compassion is nice, and those people who show me some compassion is wonderful, but I do share that with you because, even though things go haywire in my life too, I do practice what I preach, and I use these tools that I give to you. I use them myself all the time. And I like to kind of share some of that wisdom with you occasionally. So thank you so much for coming back. Because, I am certifying badasses one podcast at a time. And if you have been listening to the podcast, you've been shared the podcast, or you're sharing the podcast with others, well, you're already badass, aren't you? And when you share it with somebody else, you're sharing it with somebody who you also know is badass. Now, come on. BADASS is an acronym, and, I've been going through the entire acronym. I do it each month. I focus on one letter in the acronym. Last month, we covered the B in BADASS, which means be yourself. And then I teach you tools on how you can discover who you really are, what you really want, and what your unique skills, talents, and qualities are. And who doesn't need that? We also did that in January. So February, we covered the letter A in BADASS, which stands for attitude is everything. And you need a positive one if you're going to succeed. And that's where we're at again. We're at the top of the chain here, or of the acronym, with the first A in BADASS. So that's where I'm at. So Wednesday Wisdom today, the entire month of September, Wednesday Wisdoms are going to cover the letter A in BADASS, which is attitude is everything. Also, on my Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day podcast, which you can find on this same platform, just search my name with Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day and you'll find it. Those are 60 seconds, daily nourishment for wisdom, success, and personal growth. And right now, through the month of September, we're focusing on things to say no to, and it's really gaining some traction over there too. So don't miss out. Please, I'm just pushing out as much positive vibes and tips and tools for you that I possibly can. And why do I do this? Because it helps me too. I did have somebody approach me a couple of weeks ago at a networking event, and I think I shared about this. I've been sharing it with several people. How do you therapists, when you listen to people's problems every single day, day in and day out, hour after hour, how do you cope with that? How do you do that? And I explain, because the BADASS podcast and the things that I'm doing are part of my self-care. It's how I process. It's how I utilize my skills and talents that I've developed over years with radio and writing and psychology to create programs that not only help me, but I'm utilizing the tools that have helped me, but I share them with you. So thank you for coming and being part of my therapeutic process. It is very true that music can change your attitude. Okay, so last month, the Wednesday Wisdom revealed and taught about the letter B in the BADASS acronym. And you can go back and listen to all the Wednesday Wisdom episodes. And I'm literally introducing my License to Be Badass program to you bit by bit. If you want to take the slow train, or slow bus, you can actually just go back and listen to all these podcasts. If you want to have worksheets and things at your disposal and go through my actual program and then have some group coaching, well, we can talk about that later. But here's the thing. you can't reach new goals with old habits. That's why I have the Badass Habits ebook as well. Here I told you last week on Fruitful Friday that I was nominated for Small Business of the Year with the Murrieta Chamber of Commerce. I don't know who nominated me, and that's part of the fun. In fact, that's probably the most fun for me, is because I didn't put a friend up to it, and whoever nominated me has not revealed that to me, that they're the ones who did it. And I don't even have any suspicions over who did it, because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I kind of like it this way. But here's the thing. I did not win, but I wasn't really expecting to. The business that did win, which was Sandy Word of Witch, a sandwich shop here. She's been heavily involved in the community for years, and she's done so many great things. She completely deserved the award. And I made sure that she knew that I loved that she won, and a nonprofit organization that I love very much won Nonprofit of the Year, and Sandy is very involved with that nonprofit. So the two of these ladies, these individuals, completely deserved their reward, and I'm so glad for them. But honestly, being nominated, I know it sounds like a cliche, but just being nominated and having my name up there with all of those awesome businesses or badass businesses was really reward enough. However, the fun thing for me was, I shared with you that I had gone out and I agreed to appear in a couple of videos, and they had asked several of the nominees to come out and do the videos. And so I think that maybe there were 5 or 6 of us who actually showed, of all of the dozens of nominees. Well, for me, that's a no-brainer. That's good PR. And, I represented Badass with the red shirt, and I said a lot of badass words. So, to have that video played with all of those in attendance, and the responses that I got from attendees afterward, including emails and texts, and even just a comment while I'm there, and hey, hand me your card, or they gave me their card because they want me to get in touch with them, was so rewarding and so fulfilling. And basically the mission, the message that I gave was that, hey man, I'm a mental health professional. I do the License to Be Badass thing because it's fun, but I'm a mental health professional, and that needs to be the forefront of all businesses right now. So it's time to, have a party and celebrate and focus on your mental health, because you cannot live a successfully badass life until you master your mindset. And so I like to do that with music. I have all sorts of other tools, but for the Badass certification class and part of my License to Be Badass program, music is an important component of it. So, it's like I was speaking about mental health and your badassery, and it's part of my game plan, and I love that. And it was fun to watch myself on the video in front of this crowd. It wasn't an ego kind of way, but just about spreading the theme of License to Be Badass and how you've got to master your mindset if you want to be successful. So the comments afterward and the messaging, even though I didn't win, I won even bigger because I'm concerned about the mental health of my friends in business. So the people that won totally deserve it. Here's the thing. I want to encourage you to take some risks. Over the course of developing my Apple a Day and the Badass podcast and the Badass certification class and the masterminds and becoming a better speaker, I've done all these things at a financial risk. I've invested in myself, and I've invested in there's just the content, and some of the things I've tried have definitely failed. And some of the investments really didn't pan out. But the thing is that I've learned a ton along the way. And so therefore, I can look back at those financial risks and not think of them as failures that caused me to feel I should abandon my hopes and dreams. One of the things about living successful badassery is knowing when to be flexible, accepting those losses as a reasonable risk, and then taking what you've learned from it and applying it to the next step. Now, for skills and drills to improve your self-knowledge, these are some defining moments in your learning style. And I know my learning style is I'm auditory, visual, and I need to read and touch. I'm very tactile. Reading it's like reading definitely helps, but if I read it out loud, I hear my voice. But sometimes I just jot down bullet points, and that kind of helps me with the focusing on the reading. I learned a lot about that, my learning style, in grad school. Some people just need to watch videos. Some people need to, get their hands in there and just figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with any of these learning styles. So as you're going about your business, understand that your learning style is also different than those of you work with. Learning styles is quite interesting. I've been doing some different readings lately, and I was like opening up some devotionals, Bible devotionals. I ask individuals to do that as well, and I do have my faith, and I practice it. I don't project it onto all these other people. Of course, I can't as a psychotherapist, but my faith leads me to do some reading. So I wanted to share this one with you because it really had an impact on me as I was reading. And I think that, a lot of us have an issue with shame, and it's important for you to get the shame off of you. And so this is an excerpt from a devotional called Chasing Failure by author and motivational speaker Ryan Leake. I'm quoting it here. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm actually going to just read verbatim what it was. So I'm not plagiarizing. I am giving credit to Mr. Ryan Leake. And this is just an excerpt of one that I got off the Bible app, honestly. And it's called Shame Off You. Shame isn't random. There are specific events, moments, and even people that can be shame triggers for us. We all have different ones. Most of our triggers are related to people, are in the area of how people respond to us. If we can identify our insecurities and control them before they control us, we position ourselves for shame not to have a hold of our destiny. We can fight against shame in 3 key areas: our expectations of perfection, the temptation to shame others, and the way we talk to ourselves. When we expect ourselves to be perfect, which is impossible, it sets us up to experience more shame when we fail or do something wrong. With social media broadcasting our lives around the world, many of us feel paralyzed to act because we are afraid to be seen as not perfect. Most people get online to connect, but they leave not only feeling disconnected, but also with an extreme case of envy or shame. We need to evaluate how influences like social media are affecting us. Is it resulting in us being more motivated, passionate, or happy? Or is it causing us to drift from our goals and start measuring ourselves against unfair standards? We have to refuse to let someone else's grid make us feel bad about our life. What contributes to us shaming ourselves is that we often shame others. We judge others at a standard neither they nor we can live up to. If we think rather negatively of others, then we fall short. Will we naturally play our own tapes of judgment for ourselves when we fall short? If you want to truly be accepted for who you are and not what you do, you should show love and appreciation for others before they accomplish anything. You have the ability to release shame off of someone else when you do so. It actually contributes to removing shame off of yourself as well. This is called empathy. What have you been telling yourself lately? Do you allow negative statements to enter your space? We enjoy it when someone else shows us compassion, so why not give compassion to ourselves? Self-compassion is important when dealing with shame. It's not giving yourself excuses for why you failed, but an awareness that you're human when you fail. Give yourself a break. Forgive yourself just like God forgives you. Tell yourself you're going to be okay, and shame doesn't get to be the boss of your dreams. When you get shame off of you, you can start being who you were meant to be. So how does shame feed your fear of failure? And then where do you need to treat yourself with some compassion in your life? I did love this because I speak often about, flipping the format on the fear of failure. Once again, this was a quote. I'm not going to put the whole script in the show notes. If you want the script, you can send me an email, but the author is Ryan Leake, and it's from his book, Chasing Failure. He's an author and motivational speaker. And I really love that because I've been hearing a lot about grief lately. Obviously, I started a grief class, so I'm inviting it. Clearly. But then even in areas that I'm not inviting it, the things that have been going on in Afghanistan with our military and seeing those news stories, it just breaks my heart. And then a recent event that's happened just here in the hometown of Temecula that I wasn't aware of, but was recently made made aware of, and it's had an impact here at Michelle's place, and then on and on and on, and everything in between, so many grief stories have been coming up. So I do have the grief class and a grief support group, and it is everything you wanted to know about grief but didn't know who to ask. When I finished grad school, or I was actually in grad school, and I share this a little bit, I had to do, practicum, which is practical experience while you're in grad school to get school credit, get in the field. And I can't say that I stumbled upon it. I'm not really sure how I found it. A little bit of my marketing and networking experience on how I found this agency, this hospice agency that had a children's grief program. And that's where I started volunteering, was in a children's grief program. And that led me to be able to run some groups and facilitate activities for children and volunteer at a camp for grieving children. And I left it behind just because I was an intern, and that, as I worked there, and then, wanting to expand my experience and my education as a psychotherapist because I was new in the field. And, that's when I learned, that's when I went to another agency and was focused on late life depression, people 60 and over, suffering from depression, and was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. So I combined the grief and the cognitive, but here's the thing. I'm thankful that I'm trained in grief counseling and education, but I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I'm definitely experienced. So not only have I had some training, but I've also had some significant losses with my two brothers. And, here's the kicker. Psychotherapists don't always make the greatest grief counselors. Why? Because in psychotherapy training, we're taught to provide tools to help you fix a problem. But there is no fixing grief. You don't want to fix it. You just want to help them work their way through it. And you do have to feel the emotions in order to process it. And there's so much loss, so many stories of the loss that's tremendous today. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of hints and tips on what you can do to manage whatever kind of grief you might be feeling, whether you've actually had a real person die, or maybe you're grieving the loss of the life that you thought you were going to live because you've been diagnosed with something, or a relationship has ended, or maybe your business has had to shut down, or you're considering an entire career change. All of these events, these life events, are going to cause some symptoms of grief: anger, denial, depression, acceptance, bargaining. And you could be going through them at any time. So don't beat yourself up. Don't shame yourself. Allow yourself to feel those emotions. And here's another thing for you. Grief training taught me that we have to take care of ourselves once we help others. So always do something to take care of yourself. And some of those things can be really simple. I work with clients who are, sometimes low income, and they don't have a lot of money to go and get massages or anything else. And so when the world shut down and they couldn't anyway, we were uniquely equipped because we were used to creating opportunities to create self-care that were cost effective or no cost, but we could even do at home. So even though you might not want to have time to book a massage or a vacation or whatever else that you think you need means self-care, it could just mean changing your routine in the morning and in the evening. Shut off the news or whatever violent type programs you're watching before bed, and do something different. One of the things that I do in these summer evenings, I go outside into my backyard, and yes, I listen to music. And so I just wanted to give you that one little snippet of information today to practice some self-care. And it could be as simple as an Epsom salt bath, or it could be simple as discovering new music. Speaking of music, last week I told you about the story about rediscovering the Carpenters and the Yesterday Once More, and how it sent me back in time. So when I'm experiencing emotions of grief over the loss of my brothers, I do turn to music, but I turn to the music that they used to listen to, their favorites. And each one of my brothers have had a different style, including me. So each one died also many years apart. So what helps me is I take myself right back to the years before we moved out of the San Fernando Valley, when we were all teenagers living under the same roof. We all had stereo systems in our rooms. We had ones downstairs and one in the garage. It was like I've told you, and this is why I teach about music, is that music has always surrounded me. And the soundtracks of my brother's lives and the music that we grew up with collectively does help me work through some of my grief emotions. Sometimes I just need to be with those emotions and maybe even feel the presence of someone I love with me. So do some music discovery on this Wednesday Wisdom in your evening hours. Turn on some tunes, but be deliberate about it. Just don't let it be random. Don't let the algorithm pick your songs for you. I'm not a big fan of algorithms because I know my moods and I know my music and I know what's going to help me. But that's kind of a little bit of a radio thing, but it's also kind of the dancer thing. I also know that my entire life music has affected me emotionally in the form of movement. I'm not a musician. I took piano for about 5 years, but that's about it. And so I can pick, but I can't play. But I can sing. I'm not a singer. I can sing. I'm a dancer, though. I am a dancer. And so I use movement, and that really helps me. So there's a little bit of exercise in there. I'm stirring up the dopamine and the serotonin levels in my brain, which is increasing my mood. It's helping elevate my mood, and it's reducing the cortisol, the stress hormones. So when I encourage you to do something good for yourself, it's not just tra-la-la-la-la, hippy-dippy, take care of yourself. No. You're actually scientifically doing something good for your central nervous system, reducing the cortisol levels of stress in your body, increasing the dopamine and the serotonin, which helps to regulate your mood. When you do that, you'll start to be able to think much more clearly to help solve the problems that you face today. And isn't that badass? Okay, so I wanted you to try it. Thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday Wisdom. September the 1st, it's my very best friend Lene's birthday today. I've known her since we were 8 years old, and it's her birthday today. And I got to call her and celebrate that. She lives in Arizona, so I got to go make another trip to Sedona to plan a weekend with my friend Lene coming up probably this fall. But that's kind of what's on my agenda on this Wednesday Wisdom. So don't forget. Do some music. I got a B.A.D.A.S.S certification class coming up real soon.
B.A.D.A.S.S certification class. What's that?
Thanks for asking, Bobby. More details on that coming up on another podcast, maybe on Fruitful Friday. But if you want to be a certified badass and learn how to create your own badass soundtrack, it is a workshop. I call it a B.A.D.A.S.S certification class because it rhymes with badass. But it is a 4-hour workshop filled with lots of positive psychology. We don't talk about your thoughts and feelings and your sadness. We talk about all the things that are going good in your life. And I teach you some tools on how to create your own unique badass soundtrack. So if you want to know more about it, just stay tuned. But it's coming up in October real quick. Just shoot me an email and I'll tell you more about it.
Grab your Badass Habits ebook. Get started on your badass journey. Go to licensed2bebadass.com. Friday again, we turn up the energy. Tune in and tune up. Be bold, be brave, be confident, be badass.